Good evening and welcome to Mountain Bears. I'm Aeson Knight, and of course I'm with Techy Joe tonight. How are you, darling?
I'm doing pretty good. Please live through the broadcast.
I will do the best I can to get through this broadcast because I then have a class, and then I've got a party, then I've got a 7.5 hour shift. So, I've got a lot of shit going. I don't have time for dying.
Hey, Brenda. Hey, Gwen. This is a little bit of a different episode. You want to do something different.
It is. One, yes, this is Saturday. Your time is not wrong, nor is your date. Two, we're doing it now because we can't talk to each other until we get this show done.
Basically.
Yeah.
So I guess you could call this the Fox Hollow Farm Murders edition of Mountain Bears.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. So let's dig into it. What do you want to tell them first? Because I have a lot of opinion and a lot of thoughts.
Okay, the thing I've wanted to scream all day long. Who the fuck is Wanda?
Good question. It is the owner of the mansion's wife.
What?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Truly. Or maybe there is a Wanda now. I don't know. I don't care. Back in the beginning, Wanda the Psychic was contacted by Connie, the secretary for the PI that was investigating Richard Hamilton's disappearance. I want to know who the psychic in Ohio is.
Okay. Well, if they're a good psychic, they're going to be on Bob's.
Yeah, maybe. What kind of psychic was it? Because I found that the weirdest thing to pop up in all of this, and it just kind of dribbled out in a side quest.
Right.
And I'm like, wait a minute. Because it basically sounded like she was like, girl, he needs to get the hell out of that house.
Right.
Talking about Tony Harris, aka Mark Goodyear, which, by the way, all this got started over Hulu's Fox Hollow Murders, I think it is.
Correct.
So anyway, he actually makes an appearance, and his story deviates all over the place. That there's an original taped interview with him,
right,
from way back in the 90s. And then he does this Hulu special, and off a cliff.
Yeah.
Off a cliff. But I'm all the way back to who is the psychic?
Good question.
Because it's what's the credibility? How much did Connie feed her? What was she understanding what she was seeing? Was she experienced enough to understand what she was seeing? Because ultimately, this is a case of multiple strangulations.
Right.
Spread eagle handcuffed to a bed and strangled is kind of apparently a Friday night activity in this house.
Apparently. Or on I-70 if we want to go back before that.
There is some link to or at least overlap issues or considerations with the I-70 strangler. I don't even just getting through the Fox Hollow Farm murders is rough enough without even tacking those on top.
Right.
That part's weird.
True. Now, I have one that's unsubstantiated.
Okay.
And I will send that in private chat. This is the only Wanda, but she's in Georgia, not Ohio.
Yeah, I tried to do some searching to see, like, can we find something here? Like who is this? Like, was this someone? Because I mean, the early 90s, like, stop. Here's the thing. The problem with trying to talk about a case that's 30 years old is, like, you have to stop and back up
Right.
to the 90s. Like,
Right.
trying to approach it like it's happening today, don't do that. Because, like, the early 90s were a weird time.
They were a very weird time. And they're like, we're talking multi Aeson worlds here when we get into the 90s. Okay. We're dealing with the culture of the early 90s. We're dealing with the cops of the early 80s all the way till today. Because, yes, this shit's still going on. We're talking the gay community of the 90s, which is very much the community I came from, the generation I came from, the generation that your tag was your bar. We're dealing with 4 bars, 1 serial killer, 1 interstate, and then 1 home. Then we've got Goodyear, who I think knows more than he fucking says.
There's so many things wrong with Goodyear that I can't place between, is he the actual killer? Is he the boyfriend of the killer who doesn't care? You know what I mean? Like it's a side interest. You know what I mean? Like, he's not really an accomplice as much as, you know what I mean? Or is he just that screwed up?
Well, you know the riddle he kept giving in the thing. I'm not an accomplice. I'm not a victim. I'm not a murderer. What am I? I got an answer for you. You're the fuck buddy to the murderer.
Yeah. Like, and there's so many things wrong with his timeline.
So many. So many.
Like, I just really, like, trying to piece out what he's saying and figure out how much he's potentially lying about.
Right.
Like, I think there's grains of truth in what he's saying.
Yes.
And then I think there's long stretches of fabrications or confabulations or like he's taken some truth, but then he's altered when it occurred or what his role was.
Right.
Or he's leaving out massive quantities of detail. Or he's inserting himself into situations he couldn't possibly have been at.
Right.
Like, because supposedly him and Baumeister are watching the news coverage of them removing the bodies.
Right.
But it's like, that doesn't really, or exhuming the bones, doesn't really fit with, like, he's at his mother's, they come take his son from him at his mother's.
No, at the lake house. That's 2 hours away from Indianapolis.
That was his mother's.
No, that was the family lake house.
Okay. Whichever.
Right.
So they drive the 2 hours, get his child. But now he's suddenly on his own. He's back in the area, I'm assuming.
Right.
Because Mark Goodyear doesn't tell us where he lives.
Right.
But I'm assuming somewhere in the Indianapolis area. Probably not that close to Canada. So he left Carmel went to the lake house, had his child taken from him at the lake house, returns to Indianapolis,
right,
sees Goodyear, somewhere picks up a bunch of videotapes.
Right. Did he have them at the lake house and then had them in the car and was just carting them around?
Like, or just kept them in the car normally, or like what is this? But then, okay, so he comes back, he hangs out with Goodyear, and they watch the news. Because Goodyear's at gunpoint because apparently he had a gun at this point.
Right.
And then he ends up back in Canada to unalive himself.
Right.
But meanwhile, like, he's calling his brother for money from Canada. Like, what?
Okay, so apparently they were digging bodies multiple days. Okay.
Well, yeah, it sounded like multiple successive days with a weekend in between.
Right.
Like, there's dig, take a break, dig some more.
Right.
Just as everyone's exhausted,
right,
the neighbors come over and go, interesting thing about that ditch.
Yeah.
There's skulls on our bank.
Right. So apparently, now granted, my source, I'll be real honest about my source. I'm using ChatGPT to search through 30 years of news reports. It took them a few days. The only way she would let the police on the property is if they would go and get her son, because she's in the middle of a custody dispute with him. Because the wife was approached at least 4 times and told them no 4 times. And the last time she said, yes, if you will go get my son.
Well, but see, that doesn't line up with the Hulu docuseries. Or with the other reports that fundamentally he was gone with the son. She decided this is a great opportunity because he's weird and is getting weirder to call the investigator. And I think was just one of those moments of like, how bad could it be?
Right.
You know, like, I don't really think he's involved, but I'll entertain you.
Right.
Like, come on over, dig up the backyard. That would piss him off. Because it sounds like it's becoming a bit of a contentious double divorce. Because he's filed, she's filed. It's looking kind of messy.
Exactly.
Okay, and tensions are escalating.
Right.
So he goes off with the son. She calls the investigator. They come out and start looking. Even the investigators aren't really thinking, like, surely to God, this is all going to be like animal bones and, you know, like someone's just completely off their rocker.
Right.
Run it to the lab, basically find out, oh no, that's human. And so they start the actual exhumation.
Right. It took a few days. So this is the way I'm putting it together is she made the agreement, you go get my son and you can search this property. Suddenly there's a emergency custody order ran through the Indianapolis court division and the police officers take off 2 hours to go get the son. Why they begin the search of the property. He's got a few days there, so Goodyear could be telling the truth. It just not be day 1. It could be day 2 that they're seeing it on the news.
Well, I know, but at the same time, it's this weird up and back. Like, why does he keep going to Canada?
He only goes to Canada when he goes to kill himself, 1 trip.
Except for the trip where he was already there.
Yeah.
So that's 2 trips. So he has left Indiana, gone to Canada. They pick up his son from him in Canada. Was my understanding Lake Huron. Like he was on the Canadian side of Lake Huron.
No, he's on the U.S. side of Lake Huron, where the lake house is.
Okay, then I've totally misunderstood that portion of the of the case. But regardless, basically, how far?
Right.
How far?
2 hours.
From Indiana to the lake house.
No, from the mansion to the lake house is 2 hours.
The mansion is in Indiana.
Right.
So there's 2 hour trip there. How far from the lake house to the place that he unalives himself? Because it seems like a lot of like frantic driving with no end points.
Correct.
If you're to or without any clear idea of like what are you doing?
Right.
Like what are you doing?
Right.
Like they're exhuming bodies off your property. I don't think it matters if you're hiding evidence.
Right.
Like, you think the videotapes are gonna convict you any less?
Right.
Oh, except you're gonna unalive yourself at the end of all this?
Right.
So why destroy evidence?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like there's a complete frantic behavior here if we're to believe Mark Goodyear.
350 miles.
Hey, Devin.
350 miles from where he
Between the lake
unalived
house
and his unalivement.
Okay. Which is still a weird drive.
Right.
Like that's what I'm saying. Is there's something here? Like where are you going? Why are you going the way you're going?
Right.
Like what are you doing? Did you just pick a random spot?
That's debatable because they found him sleeping underneath the bridge the day before.
Right. Meanwhile, this is granted his business is failing, his marriage is unraveling, partly because the businesses are failing.
Right.
Partly because, it's not good. Being married to her Baumeister. But it's like, but I'm trying really hard to understand the movements. Like, I can understand, you realize you're about to potentially get arrested. Like, it's pretty much foregone conclusion. Any moment, you're going to get arrested.
Right.
Any moment. Like, you should have already been arrested. I don't know how you calmly gave over your son.
Right.
Without believing I'm getting arrested right effing now.
I'm saying that he handed over the son and didn't think he was going to get arrested because I don't think that at the time he knew that they were at the mansion.
Okay, fair point. But then once you figure it out, so argumentatively, the idea is he's at the lake house. He comes back to like the Indianapolis area because effectively Fox Hollow is in a bedroom community of Indianapolis.
Right.
Ultimately, it's like 30 minutes from downtown. Okay, so you come back, and then what? Where are you going? You obviously didn't go home.
Right.
And it doesn't sound like he had another place.
Especially for this time. I mean, because this is the timeline that we're looking at. From entrance.
You get what I'm saying. It's not like he has an apartment or he has another house or he got a condo or he, like, you know what I mean? There's nothing that he's not going home anywhere.
Right.
So unless he has a relationship with someone, why are you returning to Indianapolis? You went on this trip, your son leaves with police officers, gets taken home to his mother, while the backyard's getting dug up like it's a goddamn...
Right.
Yeah. Which and that assumes she's at home.
Right.
Like, I don't know. I figure after you tell me that, yeah, those were actually human remains, we're going to continue a search of your property. I think I would be finding a Best Western.
Right.
A Super 8. A Motel 6.
Right.
Something. And being like, ew, no, I'm not watching this.
Right. I mean, because the law enforcement gets a search warrant on the 24th. That means that they're there the morning of the 24th and find enough evidence to get the search warrant.
Mm-hmm.
He isn't found dead to July 3rd. That's 25th, 26th, 27th, 28th, 29th, 30th, 1st, 2nd, 3rd. That's a week later.
Right.
So he's got to be somewhere for a week.
Yeah, he's got to be somewhere for a week.
Right.
I'm just trying to follow a timeline of like, okay, what is he doing?
Right.
Like, I understand the first call to his brother for money.
Mm-hmm.
Then I struggle to understand why there's a second call to the brother for money.
Right.
Within that 1 week span.
Right.
Like, none of that makes any sense to me.
Right.
So yeah, June 24th, they get the search warrant. July 3rd, with the warrant pending, he's found deceased. Again, I'm trying to, and I know, get in the mind of the serial killer, Joe. But I'm trying to understand the movement there.
Mm-hmm.
What are you doing? Like, you got to know at the point in which you're watching the excavation of your backyard, you're going to prison.
Right, but I don't think he's there. I don't think he returns to the mansion.
He doesn't return to the mansion. I get that, but everyone was watching it on the news.
Right.
Literally, you couldn't have been in Indianapolis without it being on the news. And I'd say probably a good reach outside of Indianapolis. Like, that would be a pretty major news story.
Right.
Like, that's going to ramp up quick.
Right.
You got to know you're caught.
Right.
Like, nothing you're going to do at this point is going to matter.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So what are you doing? Like, why are you driving all these places? Why are you trying to potentially haul evidence around? Or was this just random items in your car that then somehow turn up missing? They were never evidence. It's just random crap in your car. Because it sounds like their whole life was just like a pile of random crap.
Right. What I find even more interesting, he has ripped out all the carpet, not just out of the trunk, but the full car, and these videotapes. Because we can believe that the Mountie saw a box of videotapes.
Okay. Which, I mean, again, fine, but was it random debris?
Mm-hmm.
Random crap. Because it sounds like the house has gone to hell.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's a borderline hoarder situation, is what it sounded like.
Right.
The stores have gone to hell.
Mm-hmm.
They literally sound like a hoarder nightmare.
Right.
Is what they were turning into. Am I supposed to believe, but his car was perfectly clean except for a box of videotapes?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, you see where I'm going with that?
I see where you're going with that. What I don't get out of it, and what I've not seen talked about, was there any search to recover such videotapes? What were the videotapes of? There was a large thing brought about him being a videographer, them being hidden cameras in there, him having the ability, like it's shown there. I don't know why anyone would have a TV turned around backwards with the VCRs facing frontwards unless you're copying videos.
Well, I mean, it looked like a video. It was a 2-deck system.
Right.
Meaning there were 2 VCRs. He could easily have copied video.
Mm-hmm.
I get that. He was copying videos for something.
Yes.
Whether it was, he's literally making videos of his crime and then copying them, which again begs the question, so what are you doing with those? Where are they going?
Mm-hmm.
Who's getting copies of the tapes?
Right.
Meanwhile, if he's left the estate,
right,
and everything's fine, and then suddenly the videos are missing,
mm-hmm.
but he didn't know he was, like, he knew there were some movements in his direction.
Right.
But supposedly he's just divorcing his wife and taking a trip with his son, and he's not like, oh, you know what I ought to be doing?
Right.
Hiding evidence of my crimes.
Right.
Like, dude, you're cooked the minute they go in the backyard.
Right.
Like, that's your bigger concern. Burn the forest down.
Right.
That's your only hope. Go through, like, rent a fucking backhoe.
Drive the one you have. This is an operational horse farm. There's no way he did not own a backhoe.
Like, just completely re-earth. Like dig and re-earth.
Right.
You had 6 fucking months.
Yeah.
If you're really concerned about hiding the evidence.
Right. Well, longer than 6 fucking months, because his son's the one that found the skull in the woods back in '94. 2 freaking years.
Well, yeah, but he's already played that off. Well, my dad was a doctor. It was a medical skeleton. So he played that off. Right. You know what I mean? But then you're at the point where the first approach you get from this investigator is 6 months before they get to search, because you said no, your wife said no, your wife repeatedly said no.
Right.
You've instructed them that if you want something, get a warrant, call my lawyer.
Right.
Okay, so you have 6 months to completely destroy everything.
Right.
Okay, you're telling me you decided to destroy the tapes?
Right.
Like, and that, like, you know what I mean? Like, if you're, but leave the what's literally been called a killing field. You left the killing field alone.
Right.
But you took the tapes.
Right.
What?
Exactly.
Like, anyone else follow that? Like, that doesn't make any sense.
Right.
Like, I know the tapes would be damning on their own.
Right.
Like, that's grab a bunch of garbage bags, put the tapes in them, and distribute them to dumpsters all over town.
Or put them in your own crusher.
Yeah, destroy them. You're fine. Rent a wood chipper.
Right.
They'll never recover. It would take forever to try to piece that back together. Would chip the tapes, your life's fine. Destroy the backyard, you got a good long period here.
Right.
Literally, like, how big can this killing field be?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, it's an 18-acre property. You're pretty much off to yourself for a good bit.
Mm-hmm.
You destroy it.
Right.
Go have a grand old time.
Right.
Dig it up, turn it over, till it up.
Right.
Haul in some dirt, cover it over.
Right.
Put some boulders on top of it, plant a few rhododendrons, and call it a damn day.
Right. Which I don't get. Okay, this property has gone through Buymeister, and he was dead.
Uh-huh.
Then she sold it to an investor. Then the current owner bought it. None of them people went through and brush hogged those woods, had the cadavers come out, have humans come out, survey the land, and then destroy the forest. Cut every damn one of those trees down, tunnel under that ground, and start over. Why would you just leave it as it is? And I don't know, I might walk my dog and find a skull on an average Tuesday.
I think so. That if you start talking about which legitimately we're not joking, the at least at the time of the Hulu docuseries, Rob Graves,
Mm-hmm.
was the owner, and it sounds like he almost bought a horror theme show.
It is rumored that he bought it to make money off of it.
Yeah. I'm like, I got that pretty quickly. Like, he's already released a book.
Right.
Or at least been part of a book.
He released a book. I haven't read it yet. It is on Audible. I have credits. So yes, I will be reading it.
Yeah, but like, he's pulled every news article. He's pulled he has gotten copies of like crime scene photos. He's pulled everything.
Right.
So legitimately, it looks like you built a business out of it.
Right.
Whether you just like had a spark, like dollar signs went off when someone said, because apparently in the process of buying the house is like, why is this so cheap?
Right.
Why is this so cheap? Why is no one living here?
Exactly.
And the real estate agent had to disclose.
Right. But I call bullshit on that story.
I think that's how the wife found out.
I think that's how bull, because she's from Indiana also. Bull. Like, if we went looking and we decided we wanted a Civil War building, we would know if we were buying Weston.
Well, but okay, this is a neighborhood of like McMansions.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently, there was a lot of trouble in the beginning based on the description, figuring out which house it was.
Mm-hmm.
To just like, you couldn't just take a description of the house and be like, oh, it's that one.
Right.
Like they like to never found the house.
Mm-hmm.
Originally.
Uh-huh.
Because they found the house before they actually identified, like they could have gotten ahead of this way faster.
Exactly.
But again, Mark Goodyear effed it up and went, I don't think that's the house.
Yeah. Which I call bullshit to that too. My theory is that he was already in a relationship with that man of at least 2 years.
Oh, well, that's are you just talking about the time between his supposed attack and the end of Baumeister's life, or are you talking about like 92 to the end of his life?
I'm going to say his supposed attack was his first time meeting.
But again, and this is where I have the Mark Goodyear problem.
Mm-hmm.
I think his description of going to the house and almost being attacked,
right?
Because there's debate there. He says he lied to police,
right,
about being attacked, and he never was. See, this is where I think there was a first visit, but I don't think it was in like 94.
Okay.
I'm thinking it was prior.
Right.
Like, I think there was a long-term relationship. I think something went sideways.
Right.
And so Mark goes to the police to go breathe down his neck. Knowing that, like, I think this is a weird, like, love triangle thing going on.
Oh, I think this is a very weird one. Now, we know they bought the place in 92. Because that's when the I-70 murders ended. That's when the property records indicate that he got the place in 92.
Yeah.
Bymeister supposedly met Mark in 94, according to the first story.
Mm-hmm. I don't think he did. I think he met him in 92.
Well, I think he met him in 93, and this is why I say that. Because the average gay relationship is 3.5 years.
Okay, I'm going to gloss over that. Here's what I think.
Okay.
And why I think it. Is if you go back to the 94 interview with Mark, and you back up 2 years, and it didn't just happen last week or whatever, or last night or whatever. It wasn't recent. If you take his story and you back up to 92 when they bought the house, it makes way more sense.
Okay.
Because it was the way he describes the house sounds exactly like a memory, and it would more so coincide with we just moved in.
Right.
So Wifey Poo is off at the old house, packing shit up. They're moving stuff over, waiting for the kids to get out of school to do the summer move. Because I'm sorry, you're buying a house. You have 3 kids. What do you think that looks like?
Right.
Like you got some time here. You're in the middle of nowhere. In your McMansion.
Right.
Your marriage is kind of
Right.
You're just starting to get a little more successful. She's distracted with a new house and packing up and closing out an old one. You're preparing the new house. Doesn't that make more sense?
Well, see, here's the problem: is he would send the wife, like the wife would go to the lake house all summer with the kids. One, he would also send her up there for weeks at a time during the winter, so he could have his episodes or deal with things.
Well, ultimately, it sounded like this was a divorce long in the making. Like, why you would go to someone else's mother, to your partner, to your spouse's mother's house? Little weird. I'm guessing whatever situation existed, it made more sense.
Right.
Like, I'll just go to your mother's.
I'll just go to the lake house.
Yeah.
Okay. Thinking in that theory and that idealism, and in my opinion, now granted, this is my opinion, we don't have that much conflict or conversation. I would think that if example, because I have to apply to my own things, if your family still had the lake house, I'm going to the lake house. That would seem like nothing new.
Well, but here's the thing: is literally, I remember all the reports kept saying that this lake house was his mother's. And like, so that sticks a little weird with me, but okay, like, fine, whatever. Like, maybe this is the better relative to go to. I don't care.
Well, the father was a doctor, so I could see the mother owning the lake house.
Yeah, like, and his dad's already died. I get a strong feeling this is how they afforded the house in the first place.
Right.
Because I mean, he borrowed the money from his mother to start the store chain.
Right.
Like, I feel like this is the kid that's just constantly like, mommy money. Like, daddy's dead. I used to get money from daddy. Now, hi mom, I need more money.
Well, this is interesting. Because according to multiple reports, the house was Julie's relative's house.
Okay.
So
see, this is where the story starts getting like confusing.
Right.
is like, are we talking about multiple lake houses? Are we talking about like did we condense some facts and get them distorted?
Good possibility, because why would I go to your family's lake house without you?
Well, again, if you got a lake house in the family somewhere, it's a nice retreat. Go some, and it would make more sense to the kids. Let's go see your grandmother, or let's go, spend time at the lake. Lovely kid distraction for the 90s, for the 80s, which is roughly the transitional period. Somewhere between like the late 80s and the early 90s. Let's go to the lake. Sounds like a lovely retreat from my husband's a fucking weirdo.
Right.
Not that like, and can we talk about the fact of like that house, that it is a McMansion.
Right.
It is 11,000 square feet of house.
Yeah. With an in-ground pool. And a patio that isn't counted into that, and 18 acres of woods, and a gated community.
Do you all understand? You could fit 11 of the house we live in inside that house. We're in a 900 square foot house. This is an 11,000 square foot house. Ergo, you could fit 11 of these inside that.
I'm thinking you can fit more than that.
I mean, granted, you would have to stack them because I'm sure that it's counting both levels.
All 3 levels, actually.
Well, yeah. Sorry, I forget there's a 3rd level.
Yeah.
Because high fun. I mean, did he really even have to have her go out of town? Like 11,000 square feet is a lot of fucking house.
Right.
Like you could be sound asleep over here.
Right.
I could be doing what the hell ever over here. Who's going to know?
Right.
Like, and it sounds like a marriage built around don't open that door.
Right.
As policy. Hey, Emily.
Hi, Emily.
Did you need her to go out of town?
Or
was that really like you're afraid of waking someone up in your 11,000 square foot home?
Yeah.
Like really, you're concerned you will wake someone up in your 11,000 square foot home.
That's why I'm saying she has to know all this was going on.
Well, I'm saying she has great plausible deniability for a couple of drinks before bed. She ain't going to know shit.
Then
we get into the fun, interesting factor of Dr. Herb Baumeister, Herb Baumeister's father, the anesthesiologist. We have a strangulation killer, the son of an anesthesiologist, who is supposedly, again, here we go back to Mark, drugging his victims, that Mark Goodyear supposedly drugged him, which, by the way, can we talk just briefly about, like, some of the what do you call them? The random utterances of Mark Goodyear.
Yeah.
The spontaneous confessions to weird shit.
Exactly. That's when you're trying to cover your ass.
He basically said, not in so many words, he said it differently.
Right.
Oh, yeah, I roofied him. He just spontaneously in the docuseries is like, oh, yeah, I knocked it. What he literally said was, well, I gave him some drugs and knocked him out. He was out for like 40 minutes. I'm sorry. I know the early 90s were a weird time.
Right.
I know that in a club scene, club environment, bar scene, bar environment,
Mm-hmm.
that was a time in which there were a lot of people being date raped.
Mm-hmm.
That drugs were more widely available. But Mark, do you understand in that spontaneous utterance what you said? Is that, oh yeah, I'm just walking around with roofies to like drug people.
See, there's a problem with that.
What? Like, but this is my whole point, is like, wait a minute. So if you did that, do you understand that Mark Goodyear in the 90s is someone just walking around ready to roofie people?
Right.
That's what his spontaneous utterance said.
But that's but that spontaneous utterance, I don't accumulate to any drug on the market at that time that is easily manageably gettable.
Well, I'm just going with the fact that it sounds like a collection,
Right.
and probably more specifically Rohypnol, because it's a short-acting drug. Like most victims who are roofied with Rohypnol wake up during the encounter.
Right.
Like, that's what I'm saying is I could see the duration of that drug being like 40 minutes or whatever Mark said.
Right. He said 40 minutes.
He said 40 minutes, but you know what I mean? Like, whatever it was, 30 minutes, 40 minutes, 50 minutes, would kind of go along with you roofied him. You knocked him out. Like you debilitated him.
Right.
And that means you have those drugs on you. Because, like, what? Because that's supposedly how he has time to go through the house and just know all these things about the rest of the house, because he was brought in by a side door next to the garage, which it sounds like there's a set of stairs next to the garage that he would have gone down and been right there at the pool.
Right.
So there's no rest of the house he needs to go through.
Right.
Like, it's not like they went in the front door and went, oh, let's go, through the entire fucking house.
Right.
To get to the pool. No, we go in the side door, you go right, down some stairs and through the garage and into the pool area.
Right.
Like, shortest distance between 2 points. Okay. But supposedly, while he's knocked out, he's going through the house. His first thought, and supposedly this is to try to figure out who this guy is. Because remember, the whole reason he left the bar with him is because he already thinks that he's killed his friend.
Right.
Huh? I struggle with that. Like, whose personality goes, I randomly think this dude who seems really interested in my missing friend wanted a missing persons poster. I've already jumped to the conclusion that dude's dead. Now I'm jumping to the conclusion that this guy looking at the poster is his murderer. But let's go home with him in the middle of the night.
Yeah, see, I don't get that. Like, this whole story makes no sense. Not only for the time, because believe me, there were hookups going on in the 90s. Now, granted, I'm a late 90s baby.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, late 90s gay.
Yeah, late 90s gay. Like, that story makes no fucking sense.
Like, again, hookup culture is what hookup culture is, what hookup culture is. And granted, I have known people that so to speak, hunted for married guys as sport.
Right.
Like, it's a little oomph to screw the married guy. It's a little more oomph to screw him in his own home, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
I'm not saying there's no
there's a points to the whole hunter's game.
Well, right, but my whole point being, it's not that it doesn't make sense to me that he would leave with some guy,
right,
that is clearly married or looks the part, to go home with him for a hookup.
Right.
That all makes sense. When you add the level, supposedly, that his friend is missing, the way they meet is because he's staring at his friend's poster being missing, and you've already jumped to the conclusion that he's who killed him. You left with him?
Right. Furthermore, supposedly after this event, you're standing up on furniture and chairs and screaming the guy's a murderer. I call bullshit to that, because that shit wouldn't have been tolerated in the clubs. The bouncer would have you over his shoulder and out the door you go.
Even if that's what occurred.
Right.
We're supposed to believe that they continued? Like, I'm sorry, you're the killer, you're the murderer. You're going to keep hanging out with the guy that keeps calling you the murderer. In public.
Yeah. In your hunting ground or bars, because apparently he hunted 4 bars, so he was home at 4 bars, comfortably enough to pick up dudes. None of this sounded right to me. Like, this was like playing to the straight man.
Right. Well, but here's my thing, though. Most of this case, and it gets literally asked to Mark Goodyear, that everything we know is through Mark Goodyear.
At the time in 96.
Even now.
No.
Like, I mean, like, the DNA evidence is the DNA evidence is the DNA evidence. Got that. When we're talking about, like, what was he doing? Who was he picking up? Why was he picking them up? What was he doing with them after he picked them up? How did that, occurrence go? What was his, he thinking? Why was he doing this? What, blah, 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 blah. All of that's Mark. All of that's Mark. We don't know he ever strangled a single one of them. If you just go with the Fox Hollow murders, we don't know that he strangled a single one of them, do we? Did we ever get any evidence or testing that showed that all of these men died of strangulation? Did we go through the bones and figure that out?
Well, minus the ligatures laying with the bones and the handcuffs and the shotgun shells that was with the bones. I mean,
okay.
Are they all strangulations? No, there's shotgun shells. There was a whole a set of expensive handcuffs at the time, by the way, found within the dirt. Like, the dude doesn't add up. He sounds like a whiny ex-husband
of a serial killer. Or more importantly, it sounds like a hookup, and then he just invented shit.
Right.
Like, maybe there was some stuff there that, for whatever reason, maybe many men hooked up with Herb Baumeister and got it.
Right. And would never say a damn word about it because you don't talk. You don't trust cops. And that's what we're going to cover in a little bit. It was about the gay community versus the badge. Minus badge bunnies. Us badge buddies are going to sit on our little hop over here.
Fair enough. But no, I mean, it's very confusing.
It is very confusing when you listen to Mark and his multiple stories. What I don't get is how this case was not looked into, like Dahmer was not looked in, like who the fuck the clown killer is. You have a serial killer that has 2 name tags on him, and it took a woman divorcing her husband to get the case cracked.
Because
Mm-hmm.
Okay, if you combine all the crimes together, the I-70 Strangler and
Mm-hmm.
the Fox Hollow Farm murders,
Right.
you have one consistent problem. He's crossing jurisdictions.
Right.
The bodies aren't turning up potentially in the same jurisdiction enough to help it all make sense.
Yeah.
To put it all together, or to empower law enforcement who is investigating missing persons in Marion County,
Right.
to go into the next county over, Hamilton County,
Right.
arrest or do anything to the suspect. Like, that was the original problem that the investigator had.
Right.
Was she's amassing evidence over here in Marion County about all these disappeared men.
Mm-hmm.
Their suspect and where they think the crime happened is 30 minutes away, just across the county line.
Right.
Sitting over in Hamilton County.
Right. Because you have two states going on with I-70 murders. Those were in Indiana and Ohio. Hello, FBI, where the hell are you? Then you have the Fox Hollow Farm, which, there's we're at 64 to 84 victims there, supposedly.
Yeah.
Okay. John Wayne Gacy.
Yeah. The clown killer.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, just trying to follow all this, like, I gotta say, luckiest serial killer ever.
Right.
Like, even if he just did the Fox Hollow murders,
right.
Even if he just did those and has no connection to I-70.
Right.
But if he did both, truly, honestly, the luckiest serial killer today.
Right.
Like, the just the way everything had to happen. That quite frankly, it crossed jurisdictional boundaries.
Right.
Because I don't, like, everyone keeps saying, oh, he was so smart. He was so smart. He was so high intelligence.
Not really.
I think he probably was, but I don't think this was a question. Like, I don't think he planned this to that level to be like, oh, I'm going to leave my, I'm going to get victims from this county and bring them to this county.
Right.
Like, what?
What?
And if you're talking about the I-70 murders, that turns into, okay, one, that's really hard to string together. But even if you were, I don't think you're driving going, well, we crossed jurisdictional lines, I can kill him now.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, I don't think that's, I don't see him having that kind of thought process with it.
Oh, I don't think he did either. But, there's a lot of undocumented ideas that I'd like to talk about. And here you get your view on this. That he was making and selling smut films.
Snuff films.
There you go.
Yeah.
Snuff films.
Mm-hmm.
What's your thoughts?
I mean, that would explain the duplication equipment.
Mm-hmm.
That's, again, like, that starts to become, okay, there's a financial incentive to commit the crime.
Right.
Or addendum to the crime. You know what I mean? Like, let's film it and make some money and keep my life going. But then why was everything in such financial disarray?
Well, it's a niche market.
It's a high-paying niche market.
Yeah.
I mean, porn is one thing. Murder is another.
Right.
Like, porn is built around niche markets.
Right.
Snuff films are a very specific one.
Right.
You can get far more people to make a pornographic movie than you can invest the resources to commit a murder.
Right.
Like, I don't think it would be an entirely financial motivated crime, but at the same time, I struggle with the idea that, like, if you were to take this number of victims, videotape it,
Mm-hmm.
put it out there as a snuff film,
Mm-hmm.
and make some money off of it
Mm-hmm.
in the 90s,
Mm-hmm.
early 90s, so late 80s, early 90s, it's not just a niche at that point. It's like, on top of everything else you're doing,
Mm-hmm.
where do you meet these people?
Well, maybe.
I understand Indianapolis is a pretty big city, but still.
Right.
Like, how like, so where did those tapes go?
Right.
I understand. You're not going to be the first one to turn up at the police station and go, because I have this weird fetish for watching people die, right. I have snuff film that I think goes with your case.
Right. Well, let's say it doesn't even control the murder. Like, let's say
30 years on,
mm-hmm.
no one's found a tape.
What if he doesn't film the actual murder? He just films the drug-induced foreplay, physical interaction on, 2 or 3 rounds of asphyxiation.
You don't think somewhere in 30 years of seeing the very specific
mm-hmm.
Pool
mm-hmm.
surrounded by mannequins,
right, which is weird to begin with,
right, that you wouldn't go, even if it's just a sex tape, these two things look the same, because it's a very unique,
right.
That was supposedly what the camera focused on, was that pool area,
right, the pool itself.
So you're gonna see the mannequins,
right?
So how do you
exactly?
If there are tapes that are like freely out there in the wild, hanging out, I really struggle, and especially in the Indianapolis, Indiana area,
right?
Because this is the 90s. I don't think you're mailing them. I don't think you have a mailing list. Like, that's a lot to get together and have no evidence of.
Right.
You don't think someone would have put 2 and 2 together, like they're watching a news report and they go, oh my God. Yeah, I mean, especially if it's just a pornographic film.
Right.
Just a pornographic film. Not a snuff film, not a snuff film. This is really weird. Looks identical. I turn up with a police department with, you might want to watch this.
Right.
And I would think most pornographic material consumers,
right,
for a non-snuff film, would show up with a videotape.
Right. Now, this is what I find interesting, is that type of film would not be allowed in Canada in the early 90s.
Okay.
So was he making a delivery?
Potentially. I mean, again, you either the pornographic film or the snuff film or both, whatever he's doing with the video camera. Which, again, hidden video at that point really doesn't jive with the era.
Okay.
Like, that's another niche.
Right.
Like, and especially if you're gonna just like cut the tape before you kill someone.
Right.
What? Like, I again, you could have just been making your pornographic film and everyone goes home. Like, here's $50.
Right.
here's $100. It's the early 90s. You can make porn for pretty cheap with a video camera.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
You know, like you're picking up random dudes from a bar.
Having an after party. Because that's the one thing, is it's an after party. For those who don't know, it's after the bar closes. You still want to get drunk. You go to the after party, and there's a group of people at the after party, and then it dwindles down.
Yeah.
So we got all that going on here.
Mm-hmm.
I know the weight of a dead body. It isn't easy. It isn't a light thing. Mm-hmm. Like a living body is lighter than a dead body. I don't think one man can move it, especially not that small of a man.
He wasn't that small. He was like 5'10", 180.
Again, he's not going to be that
huge.
He's not huge. He's not. There's no way he's bench pressing a 200 pound man.
Out that he has all this farm equipment and this easily accessible.
Right.
Like, how far would he have to drag a body? Like 10 feet?
Well, I would say it's a good 25.
Well, it looks like there's a patio that abuts the pool area.
Mm-hmm.
You're not thinking that he could just back a tractor up with a little hay bale trailer on it and just like chunk a body in it?
But get it to the woods and get it out of that thing, and to get it up to that thing, like the physicality says there's more than one person here.
I mean, I'm not too, like, everyone comes back to that in the Hulu special, and I'm just like, or the Hulu docuseries. Mm-hmm. I don't think that was really that big of a deal. Like, put it in a trailer, drag it with a rope. Like, I know no one wants to think about those aspects.
Right.
I don't think he had that many problems dragging the body away.
Okay.
Especially like your house is like tucked into an 18-acre property.
Right.
It's not like you have neighbors looking over their back fence at you like, "What you doing there, Herb?"
True. And then you have the whole burn file thing and all that going on.
And again, 18 acres of property.
Right.
You can burn some shit. No one's gonna give a shit.
Yeah. All right. So with that, and on that note, how could she not know?
I think it was a case of she knew enough not to ask.
Okay.
Some of y'all will fully understand what I say when I say that. Is, do you ever have that moment where, like, and especially for those of us who grew up with parents that had the "don't ask a question unless you want the answer,"
mm-hmm.
Because I'll answer you, and then you have to deal with that.
Mm-hmm.
I know for me that it would be a moment of like, there's so many strange and odd occurrences here.
Mm-hmm.
That if I'm the living in an 11,000 square foot McMansion, wife of a business owner, I might just make the decision to take what I already know and go, I don't want to know.
Right.
Like, I don't want this answer.
Right.
So I'm going to ignore and turn away from anything that potentially is going to upset my happy little suburban dream.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like, until it all starts to unravel.
Right.
And then I'm going to start pulling shit out of my back pocket that goes, it's really weird.
Mm-hmm.
You know what else was weird? It's really odd.
Mm-hmm.
But anything while it's happening, I'm just going to be like, and we're walking.
Right.
And we're walking in the opposite direction of whatever the hell this is.
Okay.
Again, if you're talking about like the late 80s and prior of their relationship, because they married in like 71, like they were together for 25 years. And apparently only had sex 6 times during that marriage and got 3 kids out of it. I called that pretty fucking amazing. Just to put a little feather in that cap. Interesting. Again, I think that really talks to someone who is really has got to know something is up.
Right.
Something. What something? Don't ask questions.
Right.
You ask questions, you get answers, and then you have to deal with it.
True. By the way, guys, I'm sharing the link out to the article in People. It is on Hulu. You can go and watch this and maybe understand why we was supposed to do this last night.
Yeah.
But we had a concert, so we've not really talked to each other till today.
Well, and that has been a struggle.
Yes.
We did talk a little bit, but it was mostly under the it's just so friggin' weird.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and every time like you turn a corner in it, there's more weirdness.
Right.
Weirder.
Well, like, yeah.
Second Life.
Second Life.
Shakira at Fire Island.
Yes.
Yeah.
That we own 2/3 of. So yeah, we kind of had to be there every third Friday of the month. There is no Mountain Bears because we have a concert, and I can't do both, and we can't split both. That's just the fun of it all. All right, so here's the heavy hitter question.
Okay.
Why do you think every time someone goes looking into this case with authority, they have councilmen, they have prosecutors, they have mayors, they have senators breathing down their neck, trying to shut it down left, right, and center?
That is probably more to do with, I'm gonna take a stab.
Okay.
That they're dealing with a lot of older persons.
Mm-hmm.
Which would track with like city councilmen, mayors, police chiefs. That's usually a later in career.
Right.
Generally speaking.
Right.
And I think it's we're going to open, like, we already know that this case is going to be a can of worms.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just going to be a bottomless pit of questions without answers. And the older it gets, all it's going to become is an expense and man hours and resources. And it's just gonna put this case and the fear and anger and all the ugliness of it back on the nightly news.
Well, that I think it's going to put the police fucked up again.
Well, yeah, and I think there is a lot of that related to it.
Right.
Because, I mean, it's a struggle to call it mishandled. And here's why I say that. From a 2025 context, it was horribly mishandled. Why would anyone do that? It's ridiculous how mishandled this case was. Okay, now back up 30 years. It was handled appropriately for its time.
See, here's where they fucked up. They are handing this serial killer emergency custody paperwork to take the son, and they just let him go off on his own. They have already found at least 3 bodies in his backyard.
Now, I think that's the point of mishandlement, where I think they were just that in shock. Like, I think it so overwhelmed them
Mm-hmm.
No one thought this through.
Mm-hmm.
That it's like, say what?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, say that again?
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, my brain is still not functioning. Can you say it one more time?
Mm-hmm.
Because even when you talk to, like, because they interviewed the county coroner, the only law enforcement official or anything like one that would go on camera over this case. When he called Indiana University to ask about the bones,
Right.
their anthropology department said, yes, we have 10,000 items.
Right.
And he said, oh, 1,000. And they said, no, 10,000.
Mm-hmm.
And you see this moment where even when he's retelling the story, the hamster falls off the wheel of, what the fuck do you mean there are 10,000
Mm-hmm.
items?
Right.
Because sit here and think about it. That is bits of bone, that is ribs, that is jaws, that is teeth, that is, and just trying to imagine
Mm-hmm.
10,000
Mm-hmm.
as a collection.
Mm-hmm. Now, granted, he is the second coroner since the coroner was the original coroner was over this case. He is not the one that originally took this case. He's not the second guy that walked into the office and went, damn, he fucked up. We need to fix this. He's the guy after that.
He's the guy that goes, what are you even talking about?
Yes.
And then he starts looking into it and he goes, what the hell are we doing?
My question is if those were female bodies, how fast would the first coroner have handled this case and identified every one of them?
And that's probably a bigger part of it.
Yeah.
Especially when they started making the initial connections that these were gay men.
Right.
Like, these are known homosexuals.
Mm-hmm.
And arguably, and I'm not trying to disparage victims. I'm really not. It's not about victim blaming. It really, truly isn't.
Mm-hmm.
But when you back up to the 90s,
mm-hmm.
that's not the victim you want to be.
Exactly.
Like, missing black children get on the news faster than missing homosexuals in the 90s.
And today.
And note how few of those you see.
Exactly.
So, with that in mind, I really think that standard protocol, and so why I argue the case was not mishandled, and I put that in air quotes if you're listening. The reason I think that wasn't mishandled is this was standard operating procedure, especially once they made the connection to, gotta be Herm Baumeister.
Right.
Okay, he's dead. We have 10,000 specimens. We'd really like all this to go away.
Right.
Because it looks bad for Indianapolis. It looks bad for Carmel, Indiana, the bedroom community where this house was.
Right.
It looks bad for Hamilton County. It looks bad for Marion County. The only thing more questions are going to unravel is how many people didn't do what in 2025, in 2024, in 2020, in 2020, we think they ought to have.
Right.
Because again, you've got to realize that this would have been pretty much par for the course. If you look at the numbers on missing cases for white homosexual, or for any homosexual male in the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at domestic violence statistics that don't exist, for homosexuals in the 90s.
Yeah.
Because no one recorded that. No one cared. Police often didn't respond at all.
Or if they did, it was, you boys stop having this lovers fight and walk on out.
Right. So in that context, this was how that was handled.
Right. And you think there is, on estimates, they've only identified 9 of the bodies.
Mm-hmm.
They suspect they have 25. So if my math's off, my math is off, but that's 11 other bodies they've not ran through genetic testing and DNA profiling to locate somebody. Mm-hmm. Is appalling.
And how many rape kits have they not processed?
Again, appalling.
Because, again, we talk about this.
Mm-hmm.
And realize that 30 years ago was a whole different world.
Right.
Of police investigation, how we approached crime, what we believed, and what we actually spent resources, because you do have to remember in the late 80s, early 90s, DNA testing was new and very expensive.
Right.
So there are numerous rape kits, murder cases with DNA, whatever DNA evidence that has just left to languish on a shelf.
Right. But why these bodies, or parts of bodies, have been transported to Dallas to be ran through their genealogical DNA databases is insane. They can identify the Green State serial killer, but they can't do the Baumeister case.
Right. But what they've actually said to potential victim families is send us a check, we'll start processing.
Right.
And I think that's the statement that really incenses most people.
But that's the first time that's been released. I am going to be highly surprised if we do not see drag pageants of Indiana, drag queens of Indiana, leather clubs, pink pistol clubs, running benefits to be fostering money in that direction.
Get these kids home.
Yeah.
Wherever that may be, even if at least get them identified.
Right.
They may not go home to a loved one or a family member of any variety. Because again, the 90s was a very different time. A lot of these men would have potentially been rejected by family, were pretty much treated like dead.
Mm-hmm.
This is why they were a very targetable group and would have been completely dismissed. It's why people weren't filing missing persons reports.
Right.
Like next to kin, what next to kin?
Right.
Do you want me to go talk to the bartender at the gay club? Because that's the closest thing we got to a next to kin.
Mm-hmm. I get called Papa Bear by a lot of boys. Anyhow, we've got to wrap this up because I have to hop off to my next event. But we will be delving into the case here locally. 2020 done in a thing of that next week, I believe. The Natalie Cochran case. And that one's even more damn confusing because I am like, how does this shit occur in a relationship? Anyhow, it bombards me. But with that, take it away, Vanna.
All right. Sorry, I should have been flipping over to do that. So, of course, we want to thank Beverly Walker, Mika G, Brenda, Joan Owen, Shannon C, Shannon D, Lady Gwendolyn, Caitlin Bell, Devin, and Bella. If you'd like to learn more about us, the show, or how you too can become a Patreon sponsor and receive all the wonderful benefits our baristas receive, please visit us at pcspnetwork.com.
Yes. All right, guys. We will see you later. Bye, y'all.
Bye.